Hello, my dear student. Stay home and stay safe. Today, we will continue the friction chapter. Already, I had discussed about the static friction and sliding friction. That means about the type of frictions. What is static friction at first? What is static friction? That means let us recap the static friction and sliding friction. The maximum frictional force present between any two objects when one object just tends to move or slip over the surface of the other object is called static friction. Static friction is a kind of starting friction because an object just tends to start moving. It does not actually move, just tends to move. After that, what is sliding friction? The frictional force present when one object moves slowly or slides over the surface of the another object is known as sliding friction. Now the one of the important question already I discussed that sliding friction is smaller than the static friction. Why? I repeat again, the sliding friction is smaller than the static friction. When an object, this one is very important question, already I discussed previous day, again I repeat, when answer of that question, that means sliding friction is smaller than the static friction force. Why? When an object has already started moving on sliding, the irregularities on its surface do not get enough time to lock into the irregularities on the surface of the other object completely. Since the interlocking of the two surfaces is less when an object has already started moving. Therefore, the sliding friction is smaller than the static friction, you can say. After that, the last type of frictional force, which one is rolling friction. What is rolling friction? When an object rolls over the surface of the another object, the resistance of its motion is called rolling friction. I repeat again, when an object rolls over the surface of the another object, the resistance of its motion is called rolling friction. It is always easier to roll than to slide an object over another object. So rolling friction is much less than the sliding friction. I repeat again, rolling friction is much less than the sliding friction. Now let us take one activity to complete one activity of the rolling friction. Let us take a thick book on our table. You can see that one. A thick book on our table. Now push the book with your hands. We find that it is not very easy to put the thick book lying on the table and make it move. We have to apply fairly large amount of force to make the book move or slide on the table. When the book lying directly on the surface of the table moves, then the sliding friction comes into play. And everyone know sliding friction is greater relative to the rolling friction here. The large sliding friction between the surface of the table and the bottom of the thick book makes the books comparatively difficult to move. Place the round pencil parallel to one another on the table. You have to see the figure. Where is the figure? Where is the figure? This is the figure. Motion of the book on the rollers. Place the round pencil parallel to one another You can see three pencil here and parallel to one another on the tabletop. Let us place the same thick book over the round pencil. Now push the book with your hands in a particular direction. When we push the book, the round pencil kept below it start rolling or turning and make the book move forward easily. We have to apply a very small amount of force to make the book move when it is placed on rollers. It is much more easy to move the book placed on the rollers than to slide it directly over the surface of the table. That means you can say from this activity, it is much easier to move an object kept on the roller or the rolling things than to slide it, because rolling friction is much less than the sliding friction. You can apply, you can use and apply the rolling frictional ruling for our practical different working purpose. Number one, to pull heavy luggage fitted with rollers. Every maximum student know about that, I think. Trolley, about the pulling trolley, heavy luggage trolley fitted with rollers. Second number, heavy machine can be easily moved from one place to another by placing round logs of wood under them and then pushing with the force of hands. The round logs of wood acts as rollers and make it much easier to move the heavy machine kept on them. Number 4, advantage of the rolling friction. That means you have to use the rolling friction for your daily purpose. Wheels greatly reduce friction by rolling and hence can be used to move even heavy objects like cars, bus, trucks, trains very easily. That means all of the heavy machines or a device can move very easily, just like train, bus, trucks. As the rolling friction are very useful for us, and rolling friction is much less than the sliding friction here. Okay, students, now we have to discuss about the advantage of the friction. That means you can see the topic in NCERT book, friction, a necessary evil. That means advantage of friction. We are able to walk on ground because friction between the sole of our shoes and the ground prevents us from the slipping over the ground. This one is very important topic. I repeat again, we are able to walk on ground because friction between the sole of our shoes and the ground prevents us from the slipping over the ground. To take a step forward during walking, we lift one foot off the ground and push the ground backwards with the other foot. If there were no friction between the sole of our shoe and ground, then our shoe on the ground would slip backward direction. Since we push the grounds backwards, the force of friction acts in opposite direction always and forward direction, and prevents our foot from slipping backwards. That means here frictional force helps to walk in the forward direction. Walking on slippery ground is difficult because the frictional force on slippery ground is much less, which may not be sufficient to prevent us from slipping. It is also difficult to walk on the well polished floor because the friction on this smooth surface is very small. Some of the questions arises from our discussion. Already I discussed about first point about the frictional force is help for us. Questions are, why is it difficult to move on wet marble floor? Or another question arises, why is it difficult to walk properly on a well polished floor? Or the another question, what prevents you from slipping every time you take a step forward? All of the answers you can give from the above discussion. That means already I discussed about the topic, because friction is helpful for us for walking or to move in forward direction. If a person throws a bucket of water on a smooth marble floor, it would become even more difficult for us to walk on these with marble floor, because marble floor is a very smooth surface. Frictional force they are very less. Now next, when we maximum students know about that, when we accidentally step on a banana peel thrown on the road, we usually fall down. This is because the inner side of banana peel, being smooth and slippery, reduce the friction between the sole of our shoe and the surface of road. And this small friction force is not enough to prevent our foot from slipping back. That means you can say this small frictional force, very small frictional force act that time, not prevent our foot from slipping backwards. The another important points or advantage of the friction enables a car to move on the road without skidding. The friction between the tires of a car and the road enables a car to move on the road without skidding. When the engine of car makes the wheel on car turn, the tire pushes the road backwards at its point of contact with the road. The friction between the tire of the car and the surface of the road acts in the forward direction and prevent it from skidding. Friction provides the forward force which drives the car. If there were no friction between the car tires and the road, then the wheels of the car would spin at the same place, but the car would not move. It means wheels are spin at a particular place if the frictional force not present on the road. That time the car would stay where it was. It becomes difficult to drive and control a car on the wet road. Different questions arises from our discussion, so everyone please listen carefully. It becomes on another important point, it becomes difficult to drive and control a car on the wet road. Why? This is because the presence of water on the surface of a wet road reduces the friction and makes it slippery, and because of reduced friction there are more changes of skidding of car. Friction also enables a bicycle to move along a road. All the vehicles are able to move on the road because of the presence of friction between their tires and the surface of road. Another important point of the frictional force, friction enables us to apply brakes and slow down or stop a moving car. I repeat again the point, friction enables us to apply brakes and slow down or stop a moving car. In a disc brake, a steel disc attached behind each car wheels. You can see for the bike also disc brake also attached with the wheels of the bike and car also present. I think you can see for the bike also disc brake present, not small, attached behind the I repeat again, in a disc brake a steel disc attached behind the each car or the bike's wheels spin between the two small brake pads. When the brakes are applied to the running car by pushing the brake pedal, the brake pads press against the disc of the rotating car wheels, which produce friction between the brake pad and the metal disc, making the wheels to slow down and ultimately stop. When the bicycle is running, the brake pads of the bicycle do not touch the wheels. When we press the brake lever to apply brakes to a running bicycle, then the brake pads rub on the rims of the bicycle wheels. This friction between the brake pad and the rim prevents the wheel from the moving ahead. Due to this, the running bicycle slows down and finally stops. If there were no friction, then once a vehicle started moving, it would never stop. Another important point or the advantage of the friction enables us to write and draw on paper. We are able to write and make drawing on the paper because there is friction between the tip of pencil or pen and the paper. I repeat again, we are able to write and make drawing on the paper because there is friction between the tip of the pen or pencil and the paper. The pencil has a thin black core made of carbon which is called pencil lead. lead. When we write with a pencil, friction with the paper rubs off particles from the pencil lead, which strikes on the paper and leaves black marks on the paper. Black marks or blue marks, you can say, on the paper. When we write with a pen, when you have to write, draw by pencil, that time also color, when you have to use color pencil, that time the color marked on the paper also. You can use the color pencil also. When we write with a pen, the particles of the ink drop off from the pen's refill due to friction with paper, stick on the paper and leave mark of the writing on the paper. We cannot write with a pencil on a glass. Why? This one is important question. I repeat again. I think maximum students know about that. Guess about that, the answer. We cannot write with a pencil on a glass. Answer. We cannot write with a pencil on a glass sheet because the glass surface is very smooth, due to which the friction between the tip of the pencil and the glass surface is much less. This friction is not sufficient to rub off black graphite pencils from the tip of the pencil. The teacher is able to write on the blackboard with a chalk due to friction. This one is the also a advantage of the friction. That means if the frictional force not present, that times the teachers not able to write on the blackboard with the chalk. Teachers are able to write on the blackboard by the chalk because due to friction, because of the friction between the blackboard and the chalk. When the teacher starts to write on the blackboard with a chalk, the rough surface of the blackboard or the green board, or the, you can say, glass board, rubs off some chalk pencil with sticks to the board and the appear as writing on the board. Okay students, next day we have to discuss some important other points, or the some important advantage of the friction and disadvantage of the frictions also.